Hello and welcome to another MTDCNC podcast. This one's being filmed here at our headquarters in Burton, Latimer. I'm with Lee Scott from Starrag UK. I'm Paul Jones, the founder and CEO of MTDCNC. Lee, perhaps you could just give us a quick introduction for those that, I'm sure people listening and watching have seen and heard from you before because you've featured on a lot of our movies and productions over the time. But could you just give us a quick introduction of who you are and what you do?
Sure. Well, firstly, thank you for having us today. My name's Lee Scott. I'm the Director for Sales and Applications Engineering for Starrag UK.
Okay, good. Right, now the topics that we're going to be discussing today, quite nuanced topics and things that should be of interest to everybody within the manufacturing arena. We're going to be talking about the circular economy, of which you're going to elaborate a bit more on, sustainability, zero carbon footprints, and this all comes under one umbrella of what we're going to be talking about, which is retrofitting. Now, before we start talking about these topics, I just want to kind of maybe get out of yourself, Lee, Starrag as a group. Maybe you could just give us 30 seconds. So for those people listening that haven't heard or seen from you before, what the company actually produces and where you are in the manufacturing arena.
Sure. Well, firstly, on all the topics you just mentioned, I'm no professor of engineering or captain of industry, so these are sort of my takes on these things. And where Starrag sits in the marketplace is we're a machine tool manufacturer, but we're a solution provider. We look at products that range from the size of a pin or needle up to something that could be over 20 metres long or 350 tonnes in weight. So people come to us with a challenge, and we come up with a solution that involves a machining product that usually mills, turns, grinds, and multi-functions.
And you've got a really great selection of machine tools. I have to say, I've been to the factories and with yourself, and it's just, some of the machines we've looked at absolutely huge, then right the way down to, like you say, something that will be used in micro mechanics and micro machining. So, okay, let's pick up on this first point here then, because this podcast is really talking about zero carbon footprints and everything in the reduction of that and where it's going to, how it's going to assist people in the future, why it's important for people to listen to this and be involved in it. And it all comes down to this circular economy. So what do those two words mean?
Well, that's a great question. I think you'll probably get a different answer from everybody you ask there. I mean, we've been involved in sort of environmentally friendly technologies now and directives for probably a couple of decades. One in particular, when I joined the company 14 years ago, was Blue Competence, which was a European directive to reduce carbon footprint of machine tools. So Starrag Group, the companies within Starrag Group, have been developing lots and lots of technologies to reduce the amount of energy used in a machine tool, operational efficiency and that sort of thing for a long time. But the circular element is the cradle to grave element, where we take a machine tool, optimize its operational efficiencies, but then also look at what we do with that machine at the end of life in terms of disposal and waste, and we close the circle.
Okay, now recycling is a word I've not used yet, but it's a very broad term, and that's something that you're practicing now as a company on or with some of your machine tools in order to assist with this circular economy.
Yeah, I mean, we if you look at our business, you look at our factories to start with. You know, we're the roofs are packed with solar panels. If you look at the way the machines are designed, as I said, the technologies in the machines are designed to reduce the operating costs, the power usage, the efficiencies, etc., etc. We're also heavily involved in looking at materials, recyclable materials. So there's less waste at the end of the cycle. And we're also heavily involved in the reuse of materials and the term you used earlier, retrofit.
Which is where we're going here with this, then, Lee, because those two words kind of work in harmony, recycle and retrofit for this conversation, because you're taking machine tools and you are essentially retrofitting them with the latest technology, but keeping, well, you explain something to the Starrag.
Yeah, I want to be really clear on what we mean by retrofit, because a retrofit in the industry could be understood as simply taking an old machine, slapping a bit of paint on it, putting a new drive on one or two of the axes, and a couple of sticky plasters around the outside, and it's done, handed back to the customer as a retrofit. That's not a retrofit to us. We're talking about an OEM retrofit. So we take an old machine or a used machine, could be several years old, several decades old, and we take it back, we rebuild it, we put all new drive systems and the latest technology equipment onto it, and deliver it as a new machine with warranty, more efficient, faster machine, more powerful machine if needed, and with extra capability. But we reuse the elements of the machine that are large and expensive.
So for let's look at where the benefits and the advantages are to this. Let's take the consumer. Let's take the person that's going to be investing in this retrofitted machine. Why did they do that in the first instance? I know we've all got to be very conscious of the environment, and we are, and globally everybody's, in the majority has got the same ambition. But what is their thought process, and why are they going down this path with you?
Well, I think there's historically and up to today, there's two main reasons, and one is availability of replacement machines, particularly large machines with that same capability. And the second, and I think the biggest driver, is cost. A retrofitted machine, an OEM retrofitted machine, will save you, let's say, 30% rather than buying a brand new machine to replace it. So there's a financial advantage to it today, but I think going forward into the future, there'll be an even bigger advantage if we look at the sustainability drivers that will hopefully become legislation.
Well, so you say the machine costs less, and it's potentially quicker to do it as well, then, is it, to retrofit rather than wait for a new build? I mean, I suppose it depends on the machine, doesn't it? But
yes, it is. I mean, to do a proper OEM retrofit, then we need to dismantle a machine, ship it back to plant. Usually, we can do it in situ as well, and rebuild it. So it's not a sticky plaster. It's a long process. But you're right, it probably still is quicker than building a new machine.
And we mentioned recycle as well within it. So you're recycling what you can to assist in the retrofit. But what happens with other let's not call it, well, potentially like wastage, other parts from the machine that you can't use? Are they then, is there any recycling happening with there to also help with this whole process of we call the circular economy?
There is, and there's a lot of work being done from the government down through the universities and the catapults, for example, and the Fraunhofers in Europe. I had a discussion with an electronics component supplier to us who are doing work themselves to see what they can do at the end of life of machine tools to be able to recycle and recirculate their equipment, which fits into part of our plan, if you like, alongside. So there's a lot of directives sort of being pushed downwards, and there's a lot of activities with ourselves and our suppliers so that we can hit these objectives.
Yeah, so there's kind of a generational thing as well, Lee, where obviously the youngsters are they're coming out of school and they're hearing about reducing carbon footprint and protecting the environment and all the rest of it. So attitudes are changing.
Well, for sure. I mean, I've got two teenage children, so when we sit and eat dinner at the table, there's often a discussion about the environment. And this is it's a strong driver that's coming through the schools, and it's fantastic. So this is coming through when you talk to the young engineers and graduates today. They've got that mindset, but we are an old aging industry, and when you go to a lot of companies around and you talk about sustainability, you see people rolling their eyes. It's not perceived as important.
And what does sustainability mean to you? Because this is another one of these words.
Well, that's a really interesting question. I think sustainability wraps up all the things we're talking about. It's about driving down the operating costs and deficiencies within a machine and making them more environmentally friendly. And then I think this circular word sort of traps it all into a circle. We start with raw materials at one end, we build a machine tool, it has to produce components from metals or composites, say, when that machine comes to the end of its life. It's got to be sustainably disposed of as well.
And if you made a comparison between a new machine and a retrofitted machine, there's a really big focus on the energy consumption for obvious reasons at the moment. How do they compare? Because that's all part of this mix as well.
It's difficult to quantify in terms of a percentage, but on a newly retrofitted OEM machine, for sure, you'd have some significant benefits in terms of operating costs. You'd have more efficient motors and drives, etc., etc.
Cost being the big one, which you mentioned, which is probably at the forefront of most purchasers' mind. I've mentioned legislation, and there are certain countries in Europe that at the moment, if they use zero carbon footprint machines, they're likely to win contracts from companies or be more in a more favourable position. Do you see is that something that's in the future as well that should be considered in this sort of topic?
My view, personal view, it's an aspiration under discussion and nothing more than that at this moment in time. I think if you put a quotation down in front of a customer for X and somebody else put a quotation down with less environmentally friendly options that was a lower price, I think the price would win. I think going forwards...
What if there was some subsidy from government or something? This is where it could change.
For sure, and I think that's where it will possibly change in future. But like everything else, it's got to be pushed down from the top. So the government has to push these aspirations down as a legislation into the OEMs, who then push it down into the supply chain, and ultimately everybody who buys capital equipment, machine tools, as we're talking about now, ought to have these features within the machine that give the environmental benefits.
And as a group, how, I know this is quite new at the moment, but what's the expectation in terms of, I mean, you have such a wide portfolio of machines, which we touched on earlier. Is this something that is going to be adopted across the portfolio, or is it going to be just for specific models or specific companies within the group? Where is it at the moment, and where will it go?
Well, I was over in Switzerland earlier this week, and our head of engineering and R&D, we had this discussion over a coffee, and everything we do is sustainability, environmental ability, closed loop focused at the moment. This is where we think the market is going to go.
So is it going to be a case of when you're going out as the director of sales here and you're talking to a customer, you've essentially got the two options? If someone was looking at a specific model, I mean, I know the compact's a new range, but if they were looking at something and they were going, actually, Lee, you've got two options. You've got a retrofittable machine or you've got a new one. It's not going to be as simple as that, is it?
It's not, and it's a tricky one, because when I go to meetings at the Catapult, say, for example, and I talk to the OEM, the technical representatives from the OEMs, they're all looking very seriously at their carbon footprint now, where they make parts, how they make parts, where they transport parts to and from. Do they transport parts too far and assemble them in unenvironmental
so they're going to be
places?
looking at machines and options and going, well, which one has got the best carbon footprint, because that one is going to be held as a more favourable option than the other.
I think the more data we get and the more transparent this becomes, I think the market will change, and I think the locations will change where certain parts are made, and I think the equipment that they make those parts on will change so that they incrementally tick lots of these environmentally boxes, because no one solution is going to answer all these.
No, and you can only do so much. I mean, you're focusing on an area where you're cutting the part, you're making the machined part, but to get that component in its raw state to the machine, obviously there's a lot of time and a lot of processes to do that. So you can only do so much, can't you, if nobody else is focusing on this area. That must be a question that crops up too, because that has to be factored into what you're doing.
It does, and I think the more people understand where the CO2 comes from in a product, it's becoming very apparent that producing the raw material is a very high contributor to the carbon footprint. The manufacture, the metal cutting part, if you like, of that is a smaller percentage, but still a contributor. So we all have to do our bit. If we all say, "Oh no, it's not us; it's somebody else that has to do it," we wouldn't achieve anything. So, as I say, Starrag's been working on this now for a couple of decades, and we continue to. We think it's really important, and I think the legislation will follow. And if legislation doesn't follow, I do think the OEMs will be driving this down through the market.
And what sort of guarantees do you give on a product that has been retrofitted compared to something that would be new? Because this has got to be, this is part of the buying decision, isn't it? What's the product going to be like, and what are my assurances?
Well, that's another really good question. That goes back to what I said earlier about what is a retrofit, because putting sticky plasters on a machine isn't a retrofit, and I think really you need to go to the OEM. So we retrofit our own machines, and then we retrofit other people's machines as well, but not everybody's. So certain brands, particularly German machine tool brands, we can retrofit. And when we retrofit a machine, we sell it as a new machine. So it's sold with a full warranty and service package as you would a new machine. So from a customer's perspective, they're not just buying a quick repair, they're buying an as-new machine that's been recycled, reused. It's cost effective, but it also hits the environmental targets as well.
And will this affect the sales of your new machines? And if so, or if not, does it matter?
Well, the two go hand in hand. So at the moment, a retrofit's only really viable for a machine over a certain size and value. Small machining centres are almost throwaway items. I think if the sustainability element becomes more importantly, then the line will move downwards, and smaller and lower value machines will still be viable for retrofits. So will it affect our business?
Cost trade-off. That's a tricky one, isn't it? Because
sure.
the less a machine costs initially, to be able to do what you're suggesting on a lower value machine, that's a real balancing act, because there's a trade-off between just getting a new one versus that, isn't there? It does become more difficult down the lower end.
It does. I think the bar will come down, but it won't apply to all machines. So for retrofit as a standalone topic, retrofit will kick in at a certain size and value of machine, but as well as the cost saving, we're also offering a sustainability advantage. I think for other smaller machines, I think in terms of the materials used for the machines, in terms of the usable efficiency of the machines, so how much are they costing when they're running, and also the disposal of materials at the end of the machine will become important factors going forwards.
And I just wanted to explore, really, because it is quite a subject that is fascinating and yet not talked about that much. Is there many other companies that you believe that are offering something similar to this, or are you fairly new into the market with it, and not many others doing the same?
There's several companies out there doing retrofits of any machines, but I'd say more of a sticky plaster retrofit than a full OEM retrofit. We're not unique in this. I don't know what other companies are doing in terms of the reuse of materials and in terms of the upgrading to more efficient materials on a retrofit, whether they replace new for old or whether they replace more advanced new for old. So I don't know. I just know what we're doing.
And is there any stages in what you offer as well? Do you offer a semi-retrofit or a full retrofit or a 3/4 retrofit? Yeah, change the motors, change the drives, but don't change that, don't change it. Or is it, I know, if you want a retrofit, you are having a machine that's going to come back like...
No, there are stages. So in some cases, depending on the age of the machine, we may offer just an electrical retrofit, for example. Or we may offer an electrical and part mechanical retrofit, or we may take the whole machine away and do a full retrofit. So it depends on the requirements from the customers.
All with the same aim, though.
All with the same aim.
Final points then, Lee, just really to summarise this podcast. What is the real importance of this conversation that we've been having from an industry perspective as well, but from Starrag's?
We've talked a lot about retrofit, but I don't think retrofit's the key to this. I think it's the whole circular economy, the zero carbon footprint, and the sustainability element of what we've discussed that's the important thing. It's a new topic. It's in all the universities and it's in all the tech environments at the moment, but it's not really landed on the desks of people in the industry yet, but it will do.
Brilliant. Great stuff. If you want to learn more about the points that Lee made there, the circular economy, sustainability, and obviously the opportunity to talk to Starrag about the choices they have with the machines that they have, and of course in the various conditions that Lee talks about, then of course contact Lee. We'll put his details on the screen if you're watching, but also you may as well at this stage, Lee, just tell everybody your email address if you're happy to do that, if people wanted to contact you.
Sure, no problem. My email address is lee.scott, that's lee.scott at starrag.com, that's starrag.com.
So for your machine tool solutions and requirements with minimal carbon footprint as possible, then of course you can talk to Starrag. Thank you very much for joining us, Lee. It has been an intriguing topic.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to the MTD podcast. If you found value in this episode, please subscribe and leave a rating and review. Find more episodes on mtdcnc.com.